important into the current COVID or coronavirus pandemic, where once the lockdown is over, we are going to brutally rape the nature and the environment. And therefore, imbibing these laws, these spiritual principles in everybody's mind, soul, memory, and actions is going to be critically important and significant. It's something that is urgently required. Hello. Today we will be speaking about spiritual approaches to biodiversity conservation. Or let me say upfront that for the first time you are going to listen to 10 spiritual laws that you can apply in your day-to-day life, but you can certainly apply in your biodiversity observation, biodiversity investigations, as well as biodiversity entrepreneurship and development, which is in tune with the conservation principles. We are meeting today at a unique time in human history. Humanity is experiencing lockdown like never before, from an enemy that it can't see, from an enemy against which it has not devised any particular arsenal or a weapon, from an enemy which has caused immense loss to human life, loss to entrepreneurship, economy, loss to established norms of behavior. And the enemy that we are talking about is COVID-19 or a coronavirus pandemic. But then, some days back, I only published a video on my own YouTube channel talking about, is coronavirus pandemic good for environment? And I made that statement with a sense of responsibility. And before we talk about the 10 spiritual laws, let me dwell upon why I said, is coronavirus pandemic good for nature, good for earth, good for environment? Because what it has done, it has halted the progress and the pace and the development pace at which human is used to work. Everything has come to standstill. Lockdown has become a very familiar term in each one of our lives. We are practically locked inside of our homes. As we have locked, we have not intruded into the nature. Nature is recuperating itself. Nature is regenerating. It is revitalizing itself. It's reproducing itself. Places that are emptied by human beings are now being occupied by natural species. And therefore, you see the news articles that the monkeys and other wild specimens or species are wandering on the streets in the urban scapes. Pollution's level are dripping down drastically. Ozone hole is healing. Sitting in Jalandhar, I can see the Himalayan mountain ranges very clearly through my naked eyes. Water bodies are cleaning themselves. Ganges is several degrees clean just in a matter of 1 month. So is the river Yamuna and so many other lakes and water bodies. Air quality has improved. Nitrogen oxide level in the city's air has dropped down. But then we may, as an environmentalist or as a naturalist or a biodiversity conservationist, may rejoice this situation. But I'm equally worried. I'm worried because what will happen after we lift the lockdown? We are experiencing that air pollutants are being put into much greater quantity or increased volume into the air, because whatever loss that we have suffered due to the lockdowns, the general human tendency is to recover it. So industrial activities will ramp up multiple folds. Urbanization movement or urbanization related pollution will ramp up in multiple folds, and it will have devastating effect on the nature itself. Industries will pump more pollutant like they have never before done. Economic greediness will overpower the environmental consciousness. As such, there is absolutely low degree of environmental consciousness amongst our leaderships, amongst the entrepreneurs and our citizens at large. That degree of consciousness will deep down. And who will fall victim to all of this? The victim to all of this is the nature, which started blooming again, which started regenerating, which started recuperating. That nature will fall victim. And therefore, our selfishness, greediness, our attitude of capitalism, urban settlement related crimes, which are our habits, I would say, to create more waste, will be creating devastating effect on the health of the nature and the health of the biosphere. So what are the lessons that we have learned from this COVID pandemic experience so far or event so far? 3 distinct lessons. Lesson number 1, nature can actually take care of itself if we do not interfere into its activities. That's very clear. That was demonstrated by the nature in no uncertain ways. The second one, we human beings are the responsible species for destroying the environment, destroying the nature, and creating imbalance into the atmosphere of the earth, and therefore the devastating effect. And the third one is that therefore our approaches to nature conservation, to biodiversity conservation, to environmental management must change from human-centric to earth-centric. And those are the 3 big lessons that COVID pandemic is actually teaching us. So on this backdrop, I will now talk about why the spiritual approaches or spiritual principles are essential in biodiversity conservation or nature conservation, to say so. Let's look at biodiversity into the international context before we talk about these 10 spiritual principles. Human being has been pledging time and again that we will arrest the devastating effects that are happening on the biodiversity or on the Earth's environment. We will stop our own raping attitude for our selfishness that we are causing to the other species or other living beings other than humans. Well, we had 2010 to 2020 a decadal strategic plan for controlling the loss of biodiversity. Well, even before the 2020 arrived, we as a global leadership knew that this plan is not going to achieve its anticipated or expected fruits. And therefore, we started talking about 2050 targets or 2050 mission. And what do we call the Vision 2050 is that the Vision 2050 for biodiversity states that biodiversity is valued, conserved, restored, and widely used, maintaining ecosystem services, sustaining a healthy planet, and delivering benefits essential for all people. Well, this is a very beautifully crafted vision. But our history tells us that we are in habit of crafting visions like this, never to fulfill them. Or rather, when we craft the visions, we knew that we are going to be defaulting, and then we will engage ourselves in a pity blame game, developed versus underdeveloped, industrial versus not less progressed societies, so and so forth. Ultimately, as a humanity, as a human species, we will do nothing. And then we will blame that there is a climate change, there are increasing number of floods, there is increasing number of desertification, increasing volume of desertification or lack of water supply. However, we are not ready to sacrifice some of the momentary gains. And this all brings to the very psyche with which we are living today. Our psyche is that of gratification, that jhat mangni pad byaha. I do this, what I am going to get in the very next minute. And that is exactly where the imbibing the spiritual values in our day-to-day life, especially in our entrepreneurship life and in our biodiversity conservation efforts, becomes immensely important, significant, and something that is urgently required. But before I talk about the 10 spiritual laws of biodiversity conservation, let me just clarify something. Spirituality is grossly misunderstood as a religion. Spirituality is grossly misunderstood as yogic practices. That is not. That is a misrepresentation or misunderstanding of the word spirituality. And therefore there is a need to demystify that spirituality. Now, why spirituality and its application in biodiversity conservation? Both spirituality and science are in quest of truth. One is in quest of the truth about you, yourself, me, myself. And the second one is about learning the truth of the natural systems, the phenomena, the principles on which this world or this cosmos operates or runs so beautifully. So one is inner oriented, that is spirituality, wherein science is object oriented. And therefore science generates the knowledge about the external world. Spirituality generates the knowledge about your inner world called your soul or your Atma. One is self-experiential, which is spirituality, and it cannot be explained, but it can only be experienced. And it cannot be reduced to information because everybody's experience is going to be different. Wherein the difference between the science and the spirituality is that science is a lower kind of knowing, wherein the spirituality is the ultimate knowing. And therefore, imbibing spiritual values and spiritual practices in biodiversity conservation becomes much more important. The first and the foremost law is called law of cosmic awareness. Now, when we speak about the cosmic awareness, we speak about the awareness that encompasses the entire spectrum of everything there is. So what does this law of cosmic awareness says? And I'm going to read it to you from the text. The law of cosmic awareness says that all of the principles, phenomena, systems and mechanisms, barring human developed tools that human desire to explore, discover and research upon, do exist in functional state in the cosmos. We need to be aware of the fact that the cosmos, all living beings and non-living things, has within it that vitality, that strength, together from itself, all things necessary for its growth, its fruition, its disintegration, and its transformation. With innate and pure awareness, we are able to learn to be aware, receiving impulses and information and processing this information, trying it out, applying it and sharing it with others. So let me explain in a simple word or simple words that all the research that you are doing, whether it is law of gravity, whether it is survival of the fittest, all of these principles do exist in nature in a functional state even before you have discovered them. That means law of gravity was in existence even before it was discovered. The law of survival of the fittest was in existence even before it was explained to humanity. That means we were illiterate about it. It's just that we are becoming literate. So don't think that you have discovered something fantastic. It's just that you have passed one more level of awareness, education and information. Nothing else. So have humility. That's the purpose behind this first law, the law of cosmic awareness. Let's then talk about the second law. The second law is law of pure potentiality. And if I have to be explaining this law in a simple terms, then it's law that says impossible is nothing. Risk management is key to success. So what does it say? In our essential state, we are pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is pure potentiality. It is the field of all possibilities and infinite creativity. Pure consciousness is our spiritual essence. Being infinite and unbounded, it is also pure joy. Other attributes of consciousness are pure knowledge, infinite silence, perfect balance, invincibility, simplicity, and bliss. This is our essential nature. Our essential nature is one of pure potentiality. We are the masters of each moment, which means that each moment has access to unlimited choices. Now, this is a very important law. What does it mean? That anything that you would like to pursue as an environmentalist, as a nature conservationist or a biodiversity informatician, you can achieve it. That means if your sincere goal is to conserve the nature, we as a humanity or you as an individual scientist can be successful. So you can achieve success of any kind, may it be for you as a personal researcher or an educator or as an environmentalist or conservationist, or you as a citizen or we as a country. So this essentially rebuts and rebut that having conservation of nature is never going to be possible. Yes, it is indeed going to be possible, and it is not possible or it is impossible as it looks to us is simply because we don't want to conserve the nature. So this law actually questions the intent of humanity itself. Let's go to the third law. The third law is the law of power of empowered self. Now, what does that mean? The law means that every single individual is empowered to achieve anything that seems impossible to others. It is within the potential of every human being to live an enriching, self-aware, magnificent life. So, this law, you may say, how does it is related to biodiversity conservation? Well, this law actually essentially tells you that you as a single individual or as a single entity is capable of undertaking any research or exploration that you wish or you desire to undertake in the area of biodiversity informatics. Now, I have talked about this and the next law in detail in my ebook called Sutras, 5 Fundamental Principles for Success. So I'm not going to emphasize over here, but I can only say that the power of self involves self-love, self-awareness, self-confidence, self-discipline, and self-esteem. And I'm going to live with that. So the fourth law is law of conscious dream. What does it mean? That through conscious dreaming, you can invite miracle in your life. And miracle is nothing but a pinnacle of success. So the law itself says there is no limit to one's imagination, visualization, and thereby ability to dream consciously without any fear or favor. Again, this reinforces the power of the first two laws, the law of cosmic awareness and the law of pure potentiality, that indeed if we desire, if we dream consciously, and if we have a truest intent, then biodiversity conservation, environmental conservation, balanced nature is possibility, provided humanity changes its attitude towards environmental conservation and drops out some of the selfishness and greediness that it is currently diseased with. Let's come out to the fifth law. And the fifth law is applicable to you as a researcher or an explorer. And it's a law of questioning. I call it law of inquisitiveness. Curiosity or inquisitiveness or questioning is the distinctive feature of human being. Why do you discover new species? Why do you conserve species? Why do you do culture collection? Because you are in quest of answers to some of the questions that you are grappled with, or they are dominantly on your mind. And therefore, when we are living in the law of inquisitiveness, you question everything, not in a challenging way, but in a probing, curious, and inquiring manner. And I'm going to say that this law is very important if you want to become a true scientist or a true researcher. Because what does it law empowers you? or imbibes a habit in you is to ask question about why, what, when, where, and for who. And these 5 W's, why, what, when, where, and who, forms the basic premise of any research that you undertake or any exploration activity that you undertake. Let's go to the 6th law. 6th law is the law of conscious planning. So if you really want to know about nature, its principles, its behavior, or you want to evolve new conservation practice, you may have so many dreams, but unless there is no conscious planning, and I'm calling conscious planning, planning that takes care of all angles and facets, including the potential failures of your research work, is important. Therefore, every single minute spent in planning saves significant time needed for execution. The purpose of strategic planning is to increase one's return on energy. That is return on investment. That is the time you spend to do exploration or research. And this planning therefore improves the efficiency, productivity, and effectiveness. And this planning therefore has to be smart. SMART here stands for specific goals, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. Let's now move to the 7th law. 7th law is law of action. I call it as innovation management. So you may have plans, you may have dreams, but if you simply sit quiet in your room, will you achieve success? Will you achieve the dream of biodiversity conservation? Certainly not. Therefore, action leads to success. Without consistent effort and compounding actions, success is not possible. Rather, with consistent efforts and compounding actions, success is possible. That means as a researcher or conservationist, you may not be succeeding in the first experiment itself. So you will have to repeat it time and again, repeat it time and again, repeat it time and again. And then it is that last time when you want to drop out the whole idea and quit, you might get the anticipated results, or you might find out eureka moment in your life. So that's the law of action. The 8th law is very important. It's a law of knowledge management. What does it mean? It means that you have been given opportunity to know about the nature before anybody else can have that opportunity to know. And therefore, knowledge is meant to be used for well-being of the cosmos, planet, as well as living and non-living beings. You are not the owner of the data or information and or knowledge. You are simply the custodian. Your scope in handling such knowledge is limited to its preservation, exchange sharing, and application of it towards common goods and to ensure its fair use. So many of you who hide the knowledge, you are actually unbecoming of a researcher or a conservationist. And for the want of time, I won't go more into it. But it definitely talks about your intentions and your intuition. Is your intention only to self-serve yourself? Then you are unbecoming of a biodiversity researcher. If your intention is to serve others, then you are truly fit to be a biodiversity researcher or environmentalist or conservationist. And that leads naturally to the 9th law. 9th law is law of serving. Law of serving is the one that deals with one's intentions, approaches, to serving and giving. Why are you into the business of biodiversity conservation? Are you in the business of biodiversity conservation for the betterment of humanity and of the planet, or just to accumulate applause and recognitions for yourself and build your career of 20 to 30 years or 40 years? So your intentions, which is self-servient, is actually counterproductive to you as a true biodiversity conservationist or biodiversity researchers. And that brings me to the last law, the 10th law. The 10th law is law of spiritual being. The law of spiritual being deals with one's state of upholding trust, transparency, gratitude, gratefulness, and compassion. It also deals with your adherence to ethical practices, saying no to duplication and or replication or plagiarism. I see there is a trend. Somebody is working on rice, so I will work on wheat. Somebody is working on mice, so I will work on rabbits. There's a lot of duplication and lots of plagiarism. So, unless you are not true to yourself, you are not true to the science that you are wedded with, the profession that you are taken pledge, you won't come up as a true scientist or true innovator or a true conservationist. And therefore, having sense of gratitude, sense of responsibility, respect for other innovators is highly essential. And also having trust, truth and transparency is equally important. So being spiritual is synonymous with being a person whose highest priority is to love to himself, to others, without any favor, fear and expectations. Unless you don't love the nature, you won't be able to be a good researcher, good environmentalist. So, if you can imbibe these 10 spiritual laws into your life, not only it will help you to become a true scientist or a true researcher or a true explorer, but it will help you to rise up as a true human being. A human being who is truly interested into the balanced environment, into the sustainable development, into the best of the best conservation practices to be implemented all across. And a true human being who truly wish and desire that human race must exist on this planet years, centuries, and tens of centuries, even after he is not existent. So these laws become much more important into the current COVID or coronavirus pandemic, where once the lockdown is over, we are going to brutally rape the nature and the environment. And therefore, imbibing these laws, these spiritual principles in everybody's mind, soul, memory, and actions is going to be critically important and significant. It's something that is urgently required. I wish you all a beautiful research experience, a beautiful stint of exploration of the nature, and most of all, I wish you a regime of sustainable development and nature-tuned conservation. Have a great day.